A demon general, a dragon emperor, a race of tiger folk. With such legends, Akavir is a place of terror, and the final race from this continent is no exception. A race of serpents who consumes men and dragons alike. The vampire snakes of Tsaesci. For thousands of years, the Tsaesci thrived on Akavir without disturbing the neighboring continent of Tamriel. However, in the year 2703 of the First Era, this changed rather suddenly. In a time when the Cyrodiilic Empire was still small, a Tsaesci force known as the Dragon Guard invaded Tamriel, resulting in a violent war between the vampire snakes and the Tamrielan people. The Dragon Guard was an elite force charged not only with protecting the rulers of their kingdom, but also with hunting the dragons of Akavir. They came to Tamriel in search of a warrior born with the blood and soul of a dragon, a fabled individual known as the Dragonborn. These powerful warriors wreaked havoc across northern Tamriel, defeating scores of dragons and Nords alike, and capturing areas as far south as the Gerald Mountains in northern Cyrodiil. However, as the vampire snakes marched forth, the Colvian Empire perceived the Tsaesci threat and chose to ally themselves with the Cyrodiilic Empire, resulting in a single united state under then Emperor King Remen I. With Remen at the head of their armies, the newly unified empire was finally able to halt the Tsaesci advance, trapping them at Pale Pass and cutting off their supply lines until they died or were captured. At the war's end, the Akaviri invaders were brought before King Remen, and upon hearing his voice, the Dragon Guard immediately fell to their knees and swore their lives to him. After years of desperate search, the Dragon Guard had finally found the Dragonborn. Following the war, Remen granted amnesty to most of the Tsaesci men. The vampire snakes took on key roles in politics and the military, leaving an irreversible impact on Cyrodiilic culture and history. In year 2920 of the First Era, a Tsaesci advisor to then Emperor Remen III took the throne, becoming the first Serpent King of the Cyrodiilic Empire. One theory states that the advisor secretly assassinated all living relatives of the Emperor, leaving none but himself to succeed Remen III upon the king's death. It is said that the Serpent King ruled the empire for 300 years before he was assassinated by the Morag Tong. His son ruled for another 100 years until he too was assassinated and replaced by an Imperial, ending the reign of the Serpent Kings. Soon after, the severely weakened Cyrodiilic Empire was destroyed, and the Tsaesci disappeared from historical records. For hundreds of years, nothing was heard of the vampire snakes in Tamriel, and memories of the Great War between the Tsaesci and Cyrodiil slowly faded. That is, until year 290 of the Third Era, when Emperor Uriel Septim V foolishly thought to invade the continent of Akavir. Relying primarily on information retained from the First Era and extensive reconnaissance of the lands between Akavir and Tamriel, Uriel Septim slowly made his way east, traveling 4,200 miles with his army before finally arriving at the Akaviri coast. And, as fate would have it, the army landed in southwest Akavir, off the coast of the Kingdom of Tsaesci. Initially, Uriel Septim's invasion was successful, if enigmatic. As soon as the Empire's army landed, they headed straight for a small town off the coast, but to their shock, the town was completely abandoned. Uriel's forces easily captured the settlement and renamed it as Septimia, the first colony of the Imperial province of Akavir. The army then set forth once again, moving inland towards the center of the Tsaesci nation. As they continued their advance, the army marched through sunlit and well-watered fields that were strangely devoid of any Tsaesci resistance. In fact, the Empire rarely encountered any Tsaesci at all, save for occasional raiders and mounted patrols who shadowed them from a safe distance. Within no time at all, the invasion force stumbled upon a larger city that was yet again completely abandoned. The settlement was refounded as Ionith, and the Empire established its headquarters here due to the city's size and strategic location to dominate the countryside. In time, the Emperor sent envoys to contact the Tsaesci king in an effort to end the war before any serious fighting began. Uriel believed the Tsaesci would be in such awe of the Empire's power that he might win a province by negotiation, and that the Tsaesci would willingly surrender part of their territory upon beholding the invasion's might. But none of Uriel's envoys ever returned. In face of these bizarre circumstances, the small imperial province of Akavir began settling the region they now found themselves in control of, setting up guard posts along the river, fortifying their city defenses, and bringing thousands of settlers to work the fertile Akaviri fields. However, things were soon to take a turn for the worse. Supernatural storms began appearing out of nowhere, and blizzards ransacked the colony during the winter of year 288, resulting in the complete destruction of a large portion of the fleet. Tsaesci raiders returned in force, and decimated any scouting parties outside the walls between the two cities. Several watch forts were captured on the road between Ionith and Septimia during harsh and unnatural blizzards, while the rest of the forts had to be abandoned due to terrible weather, marking the start of the colony's downfall. On day 5 of Sun's Dawn, a large entourage of Tsaesci arrived at Ionith, claiming to bring an offering of peace from the Tsaesci king. Unbeknownst to their true intentions, the settlers gave them entrance, allowing the treacherous envoys to murder the city's guards at night, and let in a small force of their comrades who were waiting outside the city's walls. The party's mission was clearly to assassinate the emperor, and while the attempt failed, it was not without great cost to Ionith. So began the war between the Tsaesci and the Empire, in earnest. Much less is known about what transpired in Akavir following these events, but it is known that bad weather continued to plague the Empire's forces as hot, dry winds blew in from the east, and storms battered Septimia and Ionith. Then, in mid-sun's height, the Emperor marched out of Ionith to confront a large Tsaesci army, with the intention to smash the enemy force before it could gather full strength. The rapid advance of the Empire's forces initially took the Tsaesci by surprise, but Uriel was soon forced to fall back, and the legion suffered heavy damage as they retreated to Ionith. For many months, the Tsaesci besieged both Ionith and Septimia, trapping the Emperor and cutting the two cities off from one another. The supernatural weather worsened even further as savage storms continued to batter the coast of Akavir throughout year 289. With things looking bleak, Uriel and his forces had no choice but to fight their way out of Ionith and attempt to retreat back to Septimia, which was an incredibly tall order in face of the dominant Tsaesci forces. In what many later described as a heroic last stand, the Empire's armies poured forth from Ionith, briefly breaking through enemy lines before being surrounded by an insurmountable force just outside of Ionith. In the savage slaughter that ensued, the Empire's forces were routed and the Emperor himself was cut down, allowing only a small remnant of the army to return to the coast. From there, the colony's remnants returned to Tamriel, a ghost of the once mighty force that landed off the coast of Tsaesci. To this very day, tales persist of the vampire snake's physical prowess and incredible magical potency. Many claim the supernatural weather in Akavir was a consequence of the Tsaesci mages manipulating weather patterns with magical powers far beyond any known in Tamriel. Their mounted warriors were unparalleled, and the warriors of the invasion force could scarcely keep up with them, let alone defeat them. Why the Tsaesci did not resist the Empire at first is a complete mystery. The most obvious answer is that they were taken by surprise, unable to respond to the invasion quickly. Another far more frightening explanation is that the Tsaesci were so powerful they barely perceived the Empire's forces as a threat in the first place, but rather as an army of mere ants. To this day, legends of the Tsaesci as immortal blood-sucking snakes who eat and enslave dragons persist, leaving them as mythological terrors and serpents of the night. For this reason, Tamriel has not once invaded Akavir again.